So to move on to the formal session, NTW, as you've seen, was a 5-year national lottery funded programme comprising of 7 original partners working across the urban parts of the borough of Great Yarmouth. This is actually our 5th annual study visit, where we aim to share our thoughts and our learnings and our progression over the year. But today we're here to mark the end of the 5-year investment made by the National Lottery, and also to launch a new beginning of the legacy of NTW and what we move on to as a borough next. Ordinarily, we'll be meeting in some amazing, wonderful location in Great Yarmouth, but today with the weather, that's probably actually a blessing, and we want to thank teams for being able to do this remotely rather than being blown away in Great Yarmouth. So today's session, we've got some frontline or stories from the front lines. We've got the evaluators that have been involved throughout the programme. We've got some input and oversight from voluntary sector partners. We have our funders here, the National Lottery, and then Great Yarmouth Borough Council are going to talk to us about its forward plan for community focused locality working. And that will end the first hour of this session, and we will finish with a short film, and there'll be time for questions at the end of that. So firstly, I'm going to introduce Holly Knopfkat, who is the Community Development Manager at Great Yarmouth Borough Council, who will tell the tale of the last 5 years.
Hello everyone, I'm just making sure you can hear me, yeah? And see me, hopefully. Okay, so I'm Holly, I'm the Community Development Manager here at Great Yarmouth Borough Council, telling the last 5 years of neighbourhoods at work in about 13 minutes. So wish me luck. For those of you who know me, you know I can rabbit on a bit. So Neighbourhoods at Work is a £3.1 million revenue investment in Great Yarmouth-based partnership involving Voluntary Norfolk, Dial, Gyros, East Coast College, Mind, Future Projects, Business in the Community and Great Yarmouth Borough Council. So it wasn't just a spontaneous idea. It was built on over 15 years of various investments and approaches to working in communities in Great Yarmouth, where we increasingly realised that we needed to focus on people's strengths rather than their issues and prioritise neighbourhoods or place over themes. So importantly, it wasn't an off-the-cuff bid to the National Lottery. We'd actually had multiple failed bids into their various funding streams where our strengths and whole place focus didn't fit with their thematic funding streams. And so we engaged in what turned into a 2-year conversation with the lottery, where we convinced them to take a chance on us in Great Yarmouth and invest in us via a place-based lens. So this was the first time they'd ever done this, but they did it because they came to understand and commit to our theory of change. And that is that the strength and connectedness of communities, the quality and accessibility of support services and the economic growth potential are all interconnected and interdependent. So places can't really thrive unless all of these things are working. Next slide. So visually, our theory of change looked like this. Rather than being sort of simple and linear like many theory of changes are, ours is based on real experiences of working with people, and it models, therefore, the realities of real life. So we all have ups and downs. So ups like getting a job or making new friends or achieving a goal, and downs like relationship breakdown or bereavement or financial trouble, those sorts of things. So we've all had times when we all need public services, and we've all had times when we need help from friends. So this is what we've tried to demonstrate with our model. You can see the ups and downs, and you can see the different interactions. And if you want to take a detailed look at that, then have a look at our website. So therefore, our theory of change really tried to embody the complexity of real life. So we know that understanding complexity is pivotal, and that if we fail to embrace that, then we wouldn't be able to achieve the outcomes that we were seeking. Flexibility and adaptability have been key. So the context in which social support or interventions are undertaken is constantly changing, isn't it? So we made sure that the framework for neighbourhoods at work was flexible enough to reflect and adapt to change in order for the right sort of support to be given and received at the right time. So the lottery were on board with this from the start, which in my experience is pretty unique for funding of this scale. It may seem small, but our firm stance on language was also really important to us. By introducing people to colleagues rather than referring them, we were better able to properly support a successful transition into receiving support services. And actually, by calling people residents rather than clients or cases or service users, we've actually shifted from seeing people as passive recipients of support to being individual human beings, really, with agency and with different skills and interests and talents, which we have nurtured rather than just focusing on fixing the things that are wrong. So next slide, I describe the work as being ultra upstream, so focusing on wellbeing creation and prevention in its purest sense, rather than just interventions. This approach is focused on creating the conditions for community-led self-help, importantly, and having confidence in that as an approach, despite sometimes not being able to measure it. So whilst the focus is on communities doing things for themselves, there is a firm recognition that to create equity, some communities will need support to make things happen, and that's achieved through the frontline community work via Neighbourhoods at Work. So we started the programme with 8 different roles, recognising the benefits of having multiple specialisms in a team. However, over the first few years, we realised that sometimes the importance of specialism was overruled by the importance of a relationship. So we found that when a resident got on with a member of staff, that practitioner was often the best person to introduce a community group, or to support them to seek debt advice, or to nurture their skills, or encourage them to apply for that job. What hampered this was role-specific targets, meaning that we often were missing capturing tons of outcomes due to nothing more than the performance management frameworks. So we asked ourselves, look, if it can be achieved by the person that the resident has the best relationship with, then shouldn't we be trying to enable this to happen more? So during year 3, we scrapped role-specific targets and KPIs in favour of sharing them across the entire programme staff, all partners, which empowered staff to work together to do the best that they could for residents they were working with together. And as a result of that, our outcomes for people flourished. So it was a real turning point. This also made us realise that bespoke solutions are possible. So we've supported thousands of people in Neighbourhoods at Work, and every single story is a unique set of activities that enabled a positive outcome for a person. So to all the commissioners out there, this probably sounds really messy and high risk and a bit scary. Like, how can we possibly deliver 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people? But whilst that's scary to envisage, I guess what we've tested is improved, hopefully, is that it's definitely possible. And more importantly, it's critical to successful outcomes for people, because every single person and their circumstances and their motivations and their problems are all unique. And then came COVID-19, the ultimate test of community resilience and our theory of change. It's kind of been like the test at the end of the programme to see if things have worked. But guess what? Our Neighbourhoods at Work frontliners mobilised within hours of the looming lockdown, and using existing community knowledge and relationships and expertise, the team facilitated the effective setup and running of mutual aid groups for local residents and groups within the borough. So in the first 2 to 3 weeks of operation, I think the support group achieved multiple outcomes. I think we achieved supporting over 2,500 people to access support within their local community, to access our early help function in the Borough Council, and to directly support and guide, I think, over 20 community-based self-help groups to help them to coordinate their own neighbourhood responses effectively and safely. So some changes. We know that we don't exist in a vacuum and we embrace change, but it was really difficult to predict just how much change would have happened in a 5-year period. So since 2015, we've changed as a lead politically and executively. We've had multiple changes in senior management and middle management, resulting in a loss of some organisational memory, but also allowing for new ideas and insights. Personnel amongst lead partners in the partnership has also changed, and speaking honestly, this has sometimes been tricky and difficult to manage, but that just further highlights the value of relationships, really. We've also worked to find better approaches to measuring success, so challenging the number crunching bums on seats approach. As a partnership, we held regular reflective practice sessions, and as a team we realised that this sort of measurement approach was really unhelpful and sometimes almost a bit perverse, often producing a "yeah, but so what" kind of response to the wider team. Because of the size of the investment, the lottery originally wanted sort of academic rigour in our evaluation. So we originally worked with the UEA to develop randomised control trials methodology, but because we're not working on a conveyor belt, this methodology unsurprisingly did not work in real life settings. We stuck at it and flogged it for 2.5 years, but eventually we all admitted it wasn't working. So halfway through, or three years into the programme, we parted ways with the UEA and we recommissioned ERS and their methodology, which has worked to ensure that what we call the little differences that make the difference are all recognised and captured and valued, maximising the sort of the human focused learning. And once our final evaluation report is produced, actually, we hope that you all and other organisations will be able to see the value of the myriad of social interactions that's positively impacted people's lives over and above the numbers of people attending things sort of view. And we know that this has also been key learning for the lottery too, which is great. So a couple of challenges. Capturing this kind of data has been a huge challenge. We needed a system that would capture both the numbers, but also those small and significant developments in people's lives, which contribute to the positive outcomes. We also needed it to accommodate 7 different delivery partners, multiple roles, and all collectively focusing on individual residents, capturing all of those touch points. Unfortunately, at the time, no database did that, so there was nothing on the market. So we built our own. And it's fair to say that it's been a bit of a headache, and we definitely didn't achieve perfection. It's not particularly user-friendly. The content can be a bit dense and therefore hard to analyse. But we did the best that we could do in order to capture the nuanced progression in individuals. And whilst it's a little bit of a slog, like walking through treacle, it is all in there, which is great. As we've also said, the application to the partnership application, GYBC had been the lead partner, but it was really clear from the start that this needed to be a co-productive approach. It hasn't always been smooth. We've had to tread quite a fine line between sort of performance management requirements as a lead and in a framework where our targets and delivery are largely shared responsibilities, whilst also building and maintaining a shared leadership culture amongst us all. It's fair to say we've all learned a lot and we're all still talking to each other, which is great. So working together, so to ensure frontline practitioners who are employed by all the different partners were all able to work as neighbourhood teams, it was necessary to apply a sort of a matrix management approach, which is basically our normal way of doing neighbourhood management, where the neighbourhood manager leads the multi-agency team on the front line with day-to-day steers and tasks, and with the employing organisation responsible for sort of the target achievement, the performance, the pastoral care, that kind of thing. So striking that balance has also been tough, and there have been times when all partners have either been sort of too hands-on or too hands-off. But what's been made really clear was that the value of the different organisations all working together under shared local coordination as one frontline team has really been invaluable. So some of our influences. So over the last 5 years of the programme, it's been great to bring people with us, which has been exemplified by others valuing and directly investing in neighbourhoods that work delivery. Big shout out's got to go to the CCG, who led the way in this regard and who co-funded the community development worker roles in year 5, after seeing sort of firsthand the value of the wellbeing creation approach and the ultra upstream impact that it has on people's health. It's also been great to see neighbourhoods that work modelling across the county and beyond. The Life Connector role, for example, was essentially a neighbourhoods that work experiment, really, which through our sharing of all our learning with the role and its functions, it's actually inspired commissioning and delivery across the county with multiple Life Connector roles in a range of socially focused programmes. So we now see this as being modelled in some of the social prescribing work locally. There's a Life Connector style role at Citizens Advice. There's Life Connectors in the Better Together Norfolk programme. And also the same has occurred with other neighbourhoods at work roles too. So we now see Life Connectors, multidisciplinary workers, skills connectors in the Norfolk Community College BBO programme. Neighbourhood community and youth work aligned to the Neighbourhoods at Work team via MAP and their Youth Investment Fund, community connector modelling in the Community Pathways Partnership and loads more I'm sure you know of. I just want to leave you with this quote, which basically exemplifies the Neighbourhoods at Work approach to building strong communities. So that's: building a culture of resilience and prevention isn't easy. While the costs of prevention have to be paid in the present, its benefits lie in the future. Moreover, the benefits are not tangible. They are the disasters that did not happen. So hopefully you'll agree with me that quote really sums things up. And finally, I want to say a huge thank you to all the neighbourhood boards and all our community leaders who have worked tirelessly to make their communities stronger. Particular special thanks from all of us and personal thanks from me. It's got to go to residents Reg Taylor and Michael Blank, who led our community work across the borough for the last 20 years and who both sadly died in the last year. Anyone who knows them, and many of you do, will know that their contribution has been vast, and I know how very proud they were of what we have collectively been achieving in Great Yarmouth, and most recently through the Neighbourhoods at Work programme. So big to them. That's it from me.
Okay, thank you, Holly. That's a great synopsis of the last 5 years and really sets the context, but it also, to me, demonstrates how much was happening often behind the scenes as well as all the frontline delivery. So I'm going to move over to some of our first stories from the front line, and we're going to hear from Freya.
Hello, my name's Lauren Randall. I'm not Freya. Unfortunately, Freya can't make it today. She has an appointment that she can't get out of. But as a neighbourhood manager covering for Louise Tully, I've had the pleasure to line manage Freya for the last 3 years, and I know she really wanted to be here today. So hopefully I feel privileged to share her story with you all. Hello, my name is Freya. I'm a community connector for both community and Make It Happen. I'm a single parent of 3 teenage girls and worked for the project over 3 years now. I moved to Great Yarmouth in 2014. I never visited Great Yarmouth before and didn't know the area very well. I did have some extended family members who lived here, and at the time I had to move somewhere in order to keep me and my family safe. This proved to be the best decision I've ever made. But at the time, I felt very low as my experiences had impacted on my self-worth and self-esteem. My personal journey of change started when I attended a course delivered by DWP for confidence building. And from this, I was introduced to Alan, the Neighbourhoods at Work skills connector. But it took me at least 6 attempts in arranging to meet with him and kept cancelling before I felt able to be able to meet with him on a one-to-one. For his patience and acceptance that it was okay, and working with me at my own pace really helped me. I started working on a one-to-one with him, and he saw the potential in me that I wasn't able to see. He arranged for me to do a volunteer role based at Community Office on King Street, helping out on reception. This is when I really started to meet new people, learn about the area, and feeling more connected and settled. I met some amazing staff and residents, and I was encouraged to apply for the Neighbourhoods at Work Community Connector role that came up, which I was successful at. Working on this project has been life-changing for me, learning from others, workers, attending, supporting community groups and pop-ups, being part of a team that organise events and activities for families, the training I received, the positive praise and encouragement and support to push myself out of my comfort zone has helped to increase my confidence in myself. And before COVID-19, I even joined a public speaking club based at the Rotary Club, as I was determined to overcome my fears of public speaking. The people I've worked with and the friends I have made on the way have changed my life a total 360 degrees. My emotional and social well-being have improved, and I am the person I am now, able to share my story with you all today. I am now able to use my own life experiences and challenges to support and help others, giving me more personal satisfaction. And I feel I'm a good role model for my children and can see the positive changes in them, which will be lifelong lasting. Thank you for listening to my story of change.
Thanks, Laura. And I think what Freya's story tells us, it really demonstrates how NTW consciously recruited from our communities. Freya was a resident and a participant who benefited from the NTW programme herself, and then became a community connector, and was therefore a practitioner with lived experience, which is, you know, as we all know, some of the best frontline activity we can get. Thank you. We're now going to hear from Maria.
Hi everyone. My name's Maria. I'm a community I've got a little something to say from two residents we met whilst doing pop-up at the job centre. So this is from Estelle and Rob. From the day we met you and Freya, our lives changed. You have given my family hope and confidence in ourselves and have restored faith in people. We now volunteer at the Salvation Army every week and feel a huge part of the community. I have gained the courage to get myself counselling, and this is a massive step for me. None of this would have been possible if it wasn't for meeting you and your wonderful team. We would like to thank you all for your care and support that you have given us. And I've got one more from another resident that I met. He's a Hungarian resident, his name's Henrik. I first met this resident at the Feast of Nations, a community cooking group. This is where people would join one another from all around the community to cook, eat and socialise together. Henrik and I built up a relationship. We talked about some of the stuff he'd done in his country and some of the things that he was really missing. He said he'd really like to make new friends and to be part of the community that he lives in. With this, I then took him to a small group called Men in Sheds. When we first walked in, he was quite nervous, but the gentlemen that were going there, they made him feel so welcome. I explained he had limited English, and one of the residents, he had recently done some work in Bulgaria. They had a few things in common, so they made good conversations and become quite good friends. From there, he then went to another group called Community Roots, went to college. He's now volunteering at the Salvation Army doing the gardening group, the cooking group. He's been on in Great Yarmouth Mercury, and he's also now on the front cover of one of their leaflets for the community kitchen. So I'm really proud to see him smile and just be part of the community and how happy he is. It's wonderful. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Maria. It must be really hard to choose just two people that you've met over this time to talk about today. So thank you for those two examples. And Licia is now going to share a poem which is written by one of our resident participants. Licia is one of the community connectors as well. So Licia.
Hello, as you all know, I'm Ligia. I'm a community connector for the Make It Happen team, and I will be reading a poem by Dee Jones. Dee is a resident that I've met during a coffee morning in Manor Close, and she was quite shy, very anxious in public and social situations. Through one conversation that we had, I found out that she really loves writing, and the Make It Happen team arranged writing workshop that Dee and other residents participated. Dee is more confident now in her own skills and more willing to share. So I'm going to be reading her poem now. Friendships by Dee Jones. Friendships are special. Friendships are strong. When you have a best friend, you create a bond. The bond between you goes very deep. You do everything together. It's a friendship to keep. You laugh and joke, and your spirits are high. You're so happy, you feel you could fly. You laugh all day, you smile at night, because you know everything's going to be all right. But if any time you do feel low, and you feel there's no way out or anywhere to go, just remember, your friend cares about you, because this friendship's forever, and this friendship is true. Thank you.
Ligia, thank you for that. I mean, that is such an amazing achievement, from meeting Dee right at the very beginning at a coffee morning to actually getting her involved in writing sessions and getting work published. So brilliant. Well done to the community connectors. We're now going to hear from Chris Barlow, who's from ERS and has been involved in the evaluation of the Neighbourhoods That Work programme.
Thanks, Louise, for that. And hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Chris Barlow. I work for a company called ERS, and we are evaluating the Neighbourhoods That Work programme, and have been for the last 18 months. It's fair to say that Neighbourhoods That Work is an interesting project. There's not too many like it, and it's fair to say that perhaps over the last 10 years we've seen kind of much of the frontline community-facing services disappear in line with reductions in local authority funding and an end of area-based initiatives that have traditionally funded community development worker type posts. So I was really pleased to get the job of evaluating this project. It is quite different. The evaluation process itself, it's involved looking at the data that's been in the database, speaking to people, those local people, residents, but also people who have been involved in the programme, really to understand what's happened, looking at what should happen, and then sharing this in a report. So we've got the final report coming in the next few weeks, but I think this is an opportunity to share some of the positive highlights, I think. So in terms of the first slide, what's worked well? I think it's fair to say that what you have in Great Yarmouth and with this programme is a genuine partnership approach. So you have the council and a number of voluntary sector partners, and that's useful in terms of joining things up and also bringing kind of ideas to the table. What we see from elsewhere very often is perhaps kind of tokenistic, but here there's kind of genuine partnership working between the organisations. It's clear that obviously staff are line managed by a host organisation, but task managed on a day-to-day basis through the programme. And like I say, in other areas we often see tensions in this, but it's not so much in Great Yarmouth with this project, and that's a really positive point that the communication between partners has been really good on this programme. There's a real kind of project ethos across each of the neighbourhoods, so the neighbourhood manager, community development worker, community connectors, life connectors, multidisciplinary advice workers, service transformation staff have really all worked together. I think it's fair to say that there's very few egos around the room, and people tend to kind of pitch in and work collaboratively, filling in and helping each other, which is a really positive point. In terms of the neighbourhood boards, 3 neighbourhood boards, and they all work and operate very differently. They are well attended, some more than others, and they really do serve an important purpose. What were they set up to achieve? Well, I think to share information and get stuff done, and there's real evidence that they have shared information and have got stuff done to the benefit of local residents and service providers in the area. Moving on to the next slide, community development approach, and it's more than community development approach. I think there's a clear recognition that neighbourhood management and community development are different. I mean, both are certainly needed to improve the lives of the people living in disadvantaged areas who perhaps have less than people in other areas and need that help more. it's about, from a community development perspective, about supporting local organisations. And there's clear evidence through this programme that the community development workers have helped with funding bids, that's brought extra money into the area. But more than that, it's about making those connections and being the eyes and ears on the street to kind of add value in lots of other different ways by making those connections between different organisations. Service transformation has been a key part of this programme. That's essentially making things work better to better suit the needs of residents. I think Louise is going to talk a bit more about this later on, but there's been some really good examples of how that's worked and how things have changed. I think in terms of this programme, the community development approach, I'm speaking not just about the community development worker, but the wider staff, it's really allowed a resource for proactive action. It's not just about being responsive to things all the time. There's real evidence of where it's given a space for people to kind of seek out contacts to make those connections and make change happen. And that's been really valuable. What we've also found over the last 6 months is the team itself has had that capacity to respond in terms of the COVID emergency. So you had kind of boots on the ground, which has been important. But I think more than that, there's connections that have been established with the community and with the voluntary sector that have allowed a really, really effective response to COVID. Moving on to the next slide about community connectors and life connectors. Valuable posts. These people are proactive, they're visible, they're accessible, and I think not just for people in these roles, but across the team as a whole, it comes across that it's more than just a job for the staff. They're really kind of authentic and they care, and that's not the case always in programs that I evaluate. And that's a real strength, because while you have programs like this that are underpinned by processes and systems and all sorts of different things, ultimately it's the staff on the line that make the difference, on the front line that make the difference. And there's clear evidence that people have engaged with this program who otherwise wouldn't have engaged if it hadn't have been for the staff on this program. And I know that because I've sat in rooms and interviewed people who've told me that. The intensive support that's been provided has been important in terms of building trust and sorting out problems for people. And very often people will come through, will receive some support and advice, and then move on with their lives. Very often people will bounce back, but there's always been that safety net there of this project to help people if they do need to bounce back, and that has a very clear value to those individuals. What we've also been able to kind of demonstrate is the added value that's been gained from this program by the connector roles. So they help people navigate through, problems in their lives, so stopping things like evictions and homelessness, and that stops problems further down the line for the council, other council departments, or other partner services. So it serves a useful purpose in that regard. Moving on to the next slide about the impact on people. Interviewed lots of people who've been supported, lots of residents who've been supported through this programme. And the one thing that comes forward from these interviews is people feel like they matter, that somebody cares. And that's important when people are socially isolated, perhaps don't have the money to go out and do things. This really has a value, lots of added value gained there. And for many people, a real sense of now that they're part of their community, when otherwise they simply wouldn't have been. Obviously got to mention that multidisciplinary advice workers served a really valuable role on this project. So knowledgeable in terms of the advice that they've been able to give across a whole range of different themes, filling gaps and helping people. So really important part of the project. Moving on to the next slide, this is around the next two slides around the impact. So we calculated the economic impacts of the investment. So the project has helped 158 people into employment. 700 people have enhanced their skills through this programme. And we've calculated by people being in work that benefits payments to the value of almost £600,000 have been saved to the Exchequer on the basis of people being in work. And that by people being in work, they're going to therefore afford to pay council tax. So an extra £23,000 has been generated in extra council tax. Moving on to the next slide, social impact. What we've been able to kind of identify through scrutinising the database in a fair amount of depth and speaking to the frontline workers is that £16.5 million of social impact has been generated, and that's savings from reduction in things like unemployment, substance misuse, people not reoffending, homelessness and failed tenancies, people managing their debt, and improved money management, and also improvements to their skill levels, being involved in more in their community, improvements in confidence, mental health, physical health, and being more digitally included in terms of IT skills. So we've perhaps been a little bit conservative in the estimates as well there, because we don't want to over-egg the pudding. But it's really important to see that actually that it's more than just the economic impact. There's much wider savings and economic social impact that can be generated. Moving on to the next slide in terms of key learning points. There's clearly plenty of positivities, and evaluation isn't just about telling you what's going well. And so there'll be things that will appear in the report around kind of ideas for the future, and it's perhaps not unexpected with a 5-year programme that there wasn't areas of things that could have been improved. I think Holly's previously acknowledged some of those. So there's some of the kind of headlines here around the recording of data and the sharing of data. The database includes everything, but it's very difficult to manipulate. Moving on to service transformation, and so Louise is going to talk about this a bit more, but from this point forward, who is best to lead on service transformation? We've seen other projects elsewhere where perhaps it's best if it's somebody from within the local authority who perhaps sits along the corridor from the chief executive, who's able to make change happen, but getting fed that intelligence about what works from the voluntary sector and from neighbourhood managers and from community development managers. Learning points, I think critically, community development and neighbourhood management are absolutely vital and remain really relevant moving forward. There's going to be a continued focus upon economic growth. I think in the early stages of the programme, they had Business Connector and the Skills Connector in post, and then the emergence of BBO has meant that those connector roles have disappeared over the latter part of the project. But there's still some real opportunities, I think, in terms of Great Yarmouth, in terms of working with people who are perhaps thinking about getting back into work and being a real link with the BBO programmes that are operating and providing services across Great Yarmouth. There is a need, I think, still for stronger links to other organisations and services. Strong links already, strong links have been established, but more can be done. So in conclusion, on the final slide, Great Yarmouth is different in a good way. It's got a different feel to it from many other places where I go in and evaluate services. It's got quite a positive attitude and some really positive people and some good people who worked on this programme. So there's much to be proud of. Lots of opportunities going forward. It's a changing landscape. What's going to happen after COVID and the economy and everything else. But I think for me, much depends on having the essential infrastructure in place in the disadvantaged neighbourhoods. So the continuation of neighbourhood management and community development, for me personally, are absolutely vital. So that's it for me today. I know I've kind of rattled through that fairly quickly, but the report will be coming out in the next kind of month or so with more detail in there.
Great, thank you, Chris. And the report will be available on the NTW website, so don't forget to keep your eyes on that. Thank you. I'm slightly concerned that you said still more work can be done, but I think you're right. Thank you very much, Chris. And Lucy is now going to talk to us about the work that she's been involved in through the Community Connector and Community Development side.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So I'm Lucy from Voluntary Norfolk, and we've been one of the key partners in Neighbourhoods at Work right from the beginning. And what I really wanted to just do very briefly this afternoon was just to sort of reflect some of the sort of key learning from a voluntary sector perspective, and just try and drill down a little bit into sort of our perspectives on what made Neighbourhoods at Work different to work on and different in terms of ambition. So next slide, please. So I just want to focus really on 3 key areas, and we've already heard quite a lot about this already. So the importance of relationships and, you know, building strong relationships, the importance of leadership and partnership working, and the importance of building stronger communities. So next slide, please. So in terms of relationships, I think it's almost obvious that relationships are important, but I think so often within the voluntary sector, and certainly historically, we can we'll be target driven, and the way that the program is set up sometimes just makes it really difficult to do the work that we need to do in the way we need to do it. But on Neighbourhoods at Work, the targets were modest and intentionally so. So it was less important to be attaining these targets. It was more important to be building the relationships. And really importantly, this allowed the time and the sort of creative space for trust and aspiration to grow. And I think also the other aspect was that it was a long-term investment. So it was 5 years. And again, this isn't routine within the voluntary sector. So we had the time to build relationships with residents, and really importantly, this reinforced residents' agency, because it meant that they could decide when they wanted to access the service. They could dip in and out, and they could take time and do this at a pace that was right for them. Next slide, please. So the community connector role was absolutely essential. All of the roles obviously were really important, but I think it's worth just talking a little bit about the community connector role. So the community connectors were empowered to have conversations. That was a really important part of the job. So getting to know people was about building trust, and then in that way it provided the doorway into everything else. And it meant that the connectors could engage with residents on their terms, so around what mattered most to residents. Next slide, please. So in terms of leadership and partnership, the partnership worked collaboratively, and we adopted distributed leadership styles, sharing responsibility and accountability. Now, this isn't commonplace within the voluntary sector, and I think, you know, going into the partnership, we had to invest time and energy in terms of getting this right. But this was really about sort of flipping sort of leadership on its head a bit. So it wasn't a traditional style of sort of, you know, sort of standing at the front and saying what was happening. It was about sort of coordination and collaboration, and really just trying to bring people with us. And in a sense, we thought of ourselves as sort of system stewards, so creating an environment for flexibility and adaptability, and out of that, better outcomes would flow. Next slide, please. An important part of the leadership piece was building that shared vision and philosophy. And I still remember to this day that sort of afternoon in the borough council, one of the borough council rooms, sort of all of us together sitting there saying, you know, so, you know, I think we'd been operating for about 9 months, but it was like, okay, so fundamentally, what are we here to do? And, you know, we had to do that sort of thinking work and that reflection. And out of that came a lot of the sort of shift that we saw in language that exemplifies and models that sort of vision that we wanted to carry forward. So that shift that we've heard about from service user to resident, and from referrals to introductions. Next slide, please. And lastly, stronger communities. I think I'm running over, so I'm going to whiz through this. So we've heard a lot about the importance of community and community development. But essentially, it was about collective and collaborative learning, trying something new by bringing people together to learn and build relationships. And importantly, it was that process of engagement that was more important than the product. So if it was a good idea and led by residents, we went with it, confident that it would bring positive change. Last slide, please. And building community resilience means being comfortable with complexity and change. So moving away from those sort of narrow targets and linear measurements to adopt a much more holistic approach built on trust and building capacity within the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I think that really brings together that community role that was so important to embed NTW. I'm actually going to introduce myself next to talk about the service transformation element. We were very aware when we were planning and developing NTW that service transformation would be a key legacy of the programme. It entwines the theory of change, which we talk about so much, and it further exemplifies how that theory of change is embedded throughout our work and really has been a key part of our evolution. So in year 4, the service connector roles evolved into a service transformation role, which focused on facilitating the transformation at the operational level across the partner organisations. We were working with the other NTW funded partners, but also other service providers around the Neighbourhoods That Work programme to push for that change. In year 5, the service transformation role moved to a more strategic level, so we're slowly moving up here, with a transformation lead role. And in retrospect, this was quite an ambitious change, as change at this level takes a lot of time, and it's also very much been curbed by the pandemic restrictions. But we hope, as part of the legacy of NTW, that this transformation of that strategic level will continue. So 5 years is a long time. What was new and what was innovative when we started are now kind of everyday practice, both within NTW, but also across the sector that we all work in. I think NTW didn't start the curve in terms of things like the theory of change and place-based theory, but I really believe it started the curve in bringing it into a transformational community development programme. We've talked a lot about relationships today, and I think when we start talking about transformation, you see how important relationships are across all levels. So I hope by running through these slides, it will also help to build a picture of the what comes next in terms of the future of community development in Great Yarmouth. So, service transformation can be evidenced at multiple levels: at the strategic level, the operational level, the community level, and also the individual or the resident level. All are connected and all lead on from one to the other. On the next slide, we have a couple of points here that I wanted to bring out as the key elements of this strategic transformation. Firstly, the opening up of the interface between the statutory and the voluntary sectors. This was built on trust and relationships between professionals. So, for example, there was a strategic decision to have voluntary sector professionals working alongside experienced social workers in the new early help hubs in Great Yarmouth. And this has resulted in more appropriate and effective support plans for residents, because people who were working at a very professional level in social services were then also working along their colleagues who had got cultural sensitivities understanding of some of the client groups, for example. And the two of those different professions working together really did transform the service delivery at that operational level. It also exemplifies the shared learning and what we call the generous leadership that exists across the partnership. The second point is that I think the capital infrastructure development and investment that's currently being planned for the borough embeds people into its design. The partnerships have been phenomenal, both the original partners that were involved in NTW and broadening out the partnerships across the borough. And much of it has led to modelling new funding partnerships. So, for example, and Holly did mention some of these, what was originally Great Yarmouth College is a statutory body, only worked with themselves, and as a result of being involved in NTW, the college is now one of the biggest collaborators with the voluntary sector in the area, and it's also transformed the employment and the skills agenda. Dial, one of the original partners, transformed from a debt and disability specialist organisation into a multidisciplinary approach embedded in community development. Gyros, one of the original partners, is now part of a new National Lottery funded programme. The total amount, I think it's 1.8 million over 4 years, the Community Pathways Partnership, built very much on the NTW model with transformation embedded into this 4-year programme and looking at the wider partnerships. If we then quickly move on to the organisational slide, and again, much of these we've talked about today. Lucy talked about the reduced duplication. For example, Holly talked about the amazing database we ended up with, but very much as an evaluation tool. But in terms of service transformation, this really reduced duplication because introductions of residents were being made to the next person. It really stopped that revolving door that so many residents had previously experienced when they were accessing help. Lucy also spoke about the reduced competition, the partnership building, and the new funding partnership applications that have gone in. Collaboration, I think one of the best examples for me has been what happened through the Early Help Hub, that multi-agency collaboration meeting, the statutory sector, the voluntary sector partners working alongside, and also bringing together of meetings that were being held across the borough, different places, different days. There's been a big pull to bring those meetings together, so more frontline time is available to work with residents. And flexible services, we've heard a lot about this, but it really was about providing services where clients can access it, as in their communities and their neighbourhoods, and when they can access it, which may be evenings and weekends. At the community level, again, this has been touched on, so I'll whiz over these, but very much place-based approach, having these neighbourhood hubs as central locations for service delivery, and where those service interventions actually become more of community events than feeling as a resident that you're having a service experience. Community-led solutions to gaps. NTW, the community development workers, they listened to residents, they developed programmes, and now they own those programmes. So there's such a great legacy here to continue going forward at that level. So I've got my hand up to say that we're going over time. So I'm now going to move on to Joe Crabb from the National Lottery. But before I do that, I just wanted to share this with you, another event that's coming up on the 1st of October, which is a good example of the legacy of NTW. This is in partnership with, it's in partnership with Suffolk Health Watch, bringing together the statutory and voluntary sectors for mental health. So please get that in your diaries too. And now I'll move over to, or hand over to Joe from the National Lottery.
Oh, hello everyone. I'm Joe from the National Lottery Community Fund. It's great to be here today. When I was first asked to say some words, I sort of felt it was a bit like writing a best man speech about the project, but I won't talk too much about the raucous honeymoon period when the grant was first awarded, or the steering group meetings in the Maldives. I'll try to keep to topic. I'm very fortunate that I've had the experience of both ends of the Neighbourhoods That Work project. Initially, I worked in Great Yarmouth and sort of met many of the residents that benefited from the project on the ground, and more recently, having a bird's eye view, looking sort of down on top from a sort of strategic point of view. I think the one thing that stood out to me with the project, as well as the novel way of working and the partnerships being such a broad range of different services, is the ethos of the project being the same throughout the bottom level all the way to the steering group and sort of management. That ethos is carried through, which isn't actually that common. Normally when you have big organisations or big projects, the further you get away from the coalface, the sort of that ethos and that interest in that individual benefit for a community member is lost. And I think that's a real testament to Neighbourhood That Work, that you've managed to keep that partnership together and that ethos is so clear. It was a real challenge, I think, to get this funding off the ground. I think Holly touched on it. When Neighbourhoods That Work was first floated with the Big Lottery Fund, it was quite alien to us. It was the biggest investment in a place-based initiative we've ever done, to my knowledge. And it's certainly been a pathfinding project sort of for other projects to learn from. As you may know now, the Big Lottery Fund, now called the National Lottery Community Fund, has a big people in the lead ethos with a real reliance on sort of local knowledge in their grant making. And I think Neighbourhoods That Work has been part of that move towards this funding. So in a tenuous way, I sort of own Neighbourhoods That Work project, my job at the fund being a local place-based funding officer. I think there's been lots of different challenges that we faced throughout the 5-year period. And I think given the times we're in now, we're going to be asked to do more again with less. And it's vital that we make the best of the resources that we have available to provide for our communities. My hope going forwards is that Neighbourhoods That Work has enabled more friendships and introductions, not just in the communities, but in the businesses and the charitable sector, which can help us flourish and continue to work together in the future, even if there isn't this formal relationship or this banner of Neighbourhoods That Work. I hope we can continue to keep working together. That's it from me.
Thank you, Jo. And our final words are coming from Paula Boyce, who's the Strategic Director at Great Yarmouth Borough Council.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Wow, what an amazing set of slides and information. What an amazing partnership everybody's been in the last 5 years. It's slightly daunting, but also exciting as to how we move from the NTW model and take the learning and do the transitioning into a community hub. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you something that's not new, but I guess from what Holly has already said, it's about revisiting what works and actually thinking about how we take that transformational lessons that Louise has summarised and take it forward into a new community hub operating model. What's really clear with NTW is the way VCSE organisations, residents and statutory services have come together to work as best they can with sometimes quite rigid frameworks to make sure that the resident is at the heart of the community, the resident's listened to, and the resident is supported. The strength and connectedness of community is really vital for NTW, and that's one of the things, the lessons that we're taking forward. The real experience of working with the people in the whole of the borough, community, neighbourhoods that work and the mesh neighbourhood boards and the areas that they represent has been absolutely phenomenal. And as Holly's also said, in the wake of the COVID crises, it's been very important to make sure that we had grassroots connections and mutual aid groups flourished, and actually people are getting by, they're managing. It's not the best time to be on the planet, let alone in Great Yarmouth at the moment, but together I feel that we've got a very resilient community. So where we go next is the call to action is about embedding that learning and having a look at genuine place-based approach, taking the best connected work that we've done and embedding those skills and training everybody in the system across the locality to be able to listen to residents, to introduce them to services that they may need, and to make sure that our community sector, our VCSE organisations and our individuals flourish. And just in this last 6 months, we've had over 260 additional community volunteers come forward for the pandemic to assist us. And Voluntary Norfolk have been ably coordinating those within our locality of Great Yarmouth. So what I'm looking to do as Strategic Director is make sure that everything that's happened in neighbourhoods at work can carry on, but that it can carry on in terms of existing resources that are there. Because the hard fact of reality is, as lovely as the £5 million was over the £3 million was over the last 5 years, it's not there now, and we've got to move forward in terms of how we actually take this learning and transformation into services, but into the partner services and look at what we commission. Next slide, please. So, community hubs, the proposal from the Borough Council. The Borough Council is ready to take that leadership challenge, which speakers have talked about. And we want to evolve into an operating model with a number of with all of the partners that we work with successfully now. We want to share the learning of NTW. The connector skills are vital, and we want to embed those in any community-facing role across the VCSE sectors, commissioned agencies, or indeed partner organisations. We want to introduce, when it's safe to do so, collaborative workspaces and have shared priorities. And we want community spaces to meet and talk. Next slide, please. This is my final slide. It's work in progress. I think that's what I've heard. We've had 5 years of amazing time. and lots of hard work and determinations and connections and listening to stories and working out what the community needs. Community hub is an operating model of a community hub is the way forward for us, but we want to facilitate that as a borough council. We can make it happen. We want our partners, and I haven't mentioned everybody on this slide, to come with us on this journey. I think it's time, and I think we're ready because of the last 5 years' experience, to take some bold and ambitious risks and some decisions. And they might not be risks really, because actually you've already been demonstrating it across the programme. So I think it's time to start removing those system barriers to maximise impact across the partnership and across sectors, working with our CCG colleagues, working with Norfolk County Council, Adult Social Care, Children's Services and Public Health, and our VCSE organisations that are commissioned to run services, working with our police, and more importantly, our 2 primary care networks. Our proposal is to create 2 community hubs aligned to the primary care networks, and to ensure that community-facing staff across all organisations are community focused and understand how to get access to services for their individual people and residents that they're working with. So my plea to you as a partnership and as people working in this wonderful borough is we would like to set up some joint commissioning. We would like to co-produce and to transform services with you. We would like to set up an investment fund, a community investment fund, so we can together co-finance community development and connecting roles across the locality. That's my challenge to you. We've demonstrated that community connecting and community development workers and multidisciplinary working works. We have resources moving forward because many of our partners have gone out and found additional grant funding. The Borough Council has a finite amount of funding, but we're willing and ready to match fund with partner organisations. So come with us on this journey and let's make this brilliant. Thank you.
Paula, thank you so much. Whilst it's great to hear about what NTW has achieved in the last 5 years, we're now on that cusp, and it's so good to be able to hear what is going to be happening in the borough going forward. So that's all very exciting and inspiring. Thank you for that. Okay, final words on the NTW programme. It's been a long 5 years, but it's only the beginning by the look of it. I feel very inspired by what Paula's just said about the future of that connectedness and the transformation, or the service transformation going forward.